If we have growth policies like you're describing, on energy, on drilling, on lower taxes, on deregulation and so forth, I mean, that's going to help the dollar a lot. It would seem to me, well, let me ask you what you're thinking here. Would you want tariffs on foreign goods coming into the U.S., take those revenues and cut taxes on American goods and American families here? Would that be something in a second Trump term?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. Number one, I think we should have a ring around the collar, as they say. I think when companies come in and they dump their products in the United States, they should pay automatically, let's say, a 10% tax. That money would be used to pay off debt. It's a massive amount of money, even at 10%. It's not going to stop business because it's not that much, but it's enough that would really make a lot of money. The other thing I want to have is a matching tax where if India charges us, India is very big with tariffs. Oh,
yeah, very protectionist.
Okay, I mean, I saw it with Harley Davidson. I was saying, how do you do in a place like India? Oh, no good, sir. Why? They have 100% and 150% and 200% tariffs. So I said, so they can sell their Indian motorbike. They actually make a bike, Indian motorbike. They can sell that into our country with no tax, no tariff. But when you make a Harley, when you send it over there, because they were doing no business, I said, how come you don't do business with India? The tariff is so high that nobody wants it. But what they want us to do is they want us to go over and build a plant, and then you have no tariff. I said, well, that's not good. That's not our deal, okay? That's not our deal. And I came down very hard on them. But India is very big. Brazil is very big on tariffs. I mean, very, very big. And we had a couple of people, like the senator from a place called Pennsylvania that I love. But this guy was just horrendous. I said, let me ask you a question. If India is charging us 200% and we're charging them nothing for products, can we charge them 100%? No, sir, that's not free trade. Can we charge them 50%? No, sir. 25, 10, anything? No. I said, what the hell is wrong? There's something wrong. You know who I'm talking about.
I do.
Every single thing we tried to get through, he would try and block. So if India's charging us too, so what I want to have is called retribution. You could call it whatever you want. If they charge us, we charge them.
Reciprocity.
You could call it anything. There's many names. You call it equalization. If they charge us, we charge them. Very simple. Now, two things will happen. One of two things. Either they'll wipe out the tax and so will we, or we'll take in a lot of money and that's okay too. But eventually what they'll do is they'll stop doing it. But we don't do that. We have countries that charge us 100 and 150 and 200%, and we charge them absolutely nothing.
We can't be paper tigers. We just can't be paper tigers.
Well, and if we do those two things, and I do like the 10% for everybody, the problem with the 10% is that some countries are much bigger abusers than others, and some, you know, China plays with the value of the yuan always, and they always create a low value. You know, they always make it weak. Now, it sounds bad to say you have it
doing it right now, sir, by the way. What you want is falling big time.
Do you remember I used to call them and say, you better get it up, because I used to watch it. And what that does, it's a little counterproductive. It sounds terrible for China, but they make a fortune. They make it almost impossible to compete. I speak to Caterpillar, I speak to these companies. So they lower the value of their currency, and it makes it very, very hard for American companies to compete. So what do? They go to China and they build these big plants, these massive plants, and we lose all the jobs over here. And I used to be so tough on China and other countries. And I'd say, look, if you're going to do this, we're not going to do business. We'll go cold turkey if we have to. We're not going to do business. And they always relented. They always relented.
But again, you do negotiate from a position of strength, but you are, again, it's the art of the deal. We're now talking taxes and tariffs.
Eventually, you don't have that strength because the country becomes so weak that you no longer. We have, right? We have this country that is this big power, but it's not. It's losing everything. We're losing our dignity, but we're losing that big market. It has more power when you have it rolling like we had it rolling. So it loses that power. But the tariffs are great, not only for the dollar and all of those things that we know about that you and I like and understand better than most, but it's also good for keeping us out of wars. It's good. We can do a lot of power with that. There's a lot of power. You know, Putin would have never gone into Ukraine. But that was just on my relationship with him, my personality over his. Would have never gone. I used to speak to him. It was the apple of his eye, but I said, don't ever do it. And it was, tough stuff there. But he would have never done it. But he wouldn't have done it for another reason, and maybe this is even stronger. We, with this green energy, drove up the oil price, so high, where he was getting $125 close a barrel, that he made so much money that he was able to go and prosecute the war against Ukraine. I had it down to 40. I mean, I had it down to less than zero for a period of time, for a short period of time, because it was going so wild that we had so much energy, we didn't know what to do. We filled up the reserves. He just he's now taken the reserves down lower than they've ever been in history. We have essentially none. That was meant for war, not to reduce the price of gasoline before an election. But Putin would have never, ever been able to do it because we would have been at $40, $45 a barrel. When it hit over 100, I mean, he was making money. The wars are expensive. He was making a fortune over and above the cost of the war. He would have never been able to do it. He didn't have that much money. So all of these guys, these stupid people that did what they did with energy, they made Russia very rich, and Russia was able to do something that they wouldn't have been able to do. So it would have been two reasons. Number one, he wouldn't have done it, but he would have not been able to afford it. But they made energy, they made the barrel go so much. I mean, they were way over $100 a barrel. He was making a fortune. And then if you remember, I ended the Nord Stream 2. Nobody ever heard of Nord Stream 2 until I came along. I said, you mean Germany is getting their oil from Russia? So we're helping Germany with NATO and all of Europe. And by the way, subsidizing and all of those things, which I ended that 100%. But I said, so isn't that a weird thing? We're defending Germany from Russia, but Germany's paying Russia an absolute fortune to buy their oil and gas. So we ended a lot of things. Now, Biden came in, and then he immediately approved Nord Stream 2. I had that stopped cold. It wasn't going to happen.
I remember, and everybody was on board.
And we were going to sell them the oil. They weren't going to get it from Russia. They were going to get it from us.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, as you pointed out, the country is in decline right now. But I think, if I know you, you believe that this can be rescued. There's an optimistic, positive vision in a second term, a second Trump presidency that can stop the decline and move us back on the high beam. Can we end on that note? Give us a couple of quick thoughts.
Yeah, I'd say we're going to make America greater than ever before.
Growth is part of it, but there are other things that you've discussed. And can I just add one thing, sir? I don't think people know this. Your campaign, you and your advisors in the campaign, you're putting out all these great videos. You're putting out white papers on issues left and right, and millions of people are reading this stuff. I mean, you're running an issues-oriented campaign. That's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this stuff today. So we can pull up from this decline.
Yeah, we can. In fact, the nice part is we're dealing in person. Normally, I just put it up on a screen and I put it out, but we're doing it in person, which is even nicer and better because you're asking great questions. We can make America great. We have some problems. I think you're going to have 15 million people in our country that you didn't have a couple of years ago, not 4 million or 5 million. I think it's a much bigger number. Many of these people are from prisons, and they're from mental institutions, and they're terrorists, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out. We can't live with them. And so that is something that is a big job. That's a big job. That's a very important job. But we have Tom Homan, and we have all these great people that are so good at this. I had the safest border in the history of a country. Now we have the worst border. But we'll do that. But we will get this country rocking and rolling with energy. We're going to get the energy cost down. New England pays the highest energy cost practically anywhere in the world, all because of stupid energy policy. And yet they tend to vote Democrat. I mean, somebody's got to explain to them what's going on. You'll be able to buy an electric car, but you're going to be able to buy every form of car that's made. You've got to have choice, like in school. We want school choice. We want choice for buying cars and washing machines and all of this stuff. I mean, the dishwashers, they were telling me, you have to run it 5 times because it hasn't got enough water. So what they do, on. They end up using more water. I mean, the whole thing is crazy.
This can be changed.
To a large extent, everything you and I talk about is common sense, right? And we have a lot of common sense.
I love that.
And the problem is they don't have common sense. They don't know what they're doing, and they're destroying our country. We'll turn it around fast.
Thank you. Mr. President, good luck. God bless. To me, a little bit more, sir, please, about the tax cuts. In fact, Joe Biden loves to attack the tax cuts with unfactual stuff, as per usual. We've got a quick sound bite.
Sure.
Maybe you want to hear this.
Our plan is a stark contrast to the MAGA Republican plan in Congress, where they're doubling down on the same failed policies of the past that would give special tax breaks to the wealthy, keep the tax breaks that were put in place by the last president. You know, it's kind of a top-down, trickle-down economics that never, ever worked.
These are the same guys that passed a $2 trillion tax cut when Trump was president that overwhelmingly benefited the super wealthy and big corporations and didn't pay for 1 cent of it.
I'm just raising these points because everyone else interviewing you doesn't want to raise these points. So there he goes again. There's not a single comma of fact in that, but I wanted you to comment on what he's saying.
Well, first of all, it's amazing because you watch him, you don't even think he's going to get through the sentence. You know, the stopping and the halting, and there's something going on over there. But this guy is advising us. He's the one negotiating with other countries, and, you know, we're going to end up in a world war. So beyond taxes I'm talking about, we have a man that's grossly incompetent. We're going to end up in a world war the way he's going to end up in World War III, which is going to be a nuclear war. He doesn't understand what MAGA means. If you asked him right now to define MAGA or to say what MAGA is, he would not be able to say, make America great again. He's always saying MAGA, those MAGA people. But if you would say, what does MAGA stand for? He wouldn't know. He wouldn't be able to tell you that. But you know, it's called Make America Great Again. And right now, again, is probably, you have to use it because we don't have a great country. We have a country that's a laughingstock all over the world. We have a president who can't properly represent us. He goes to meetings in foreign countries and he makes a fool out of himself. He's a fool. And I can just imagine President Xi, all of these leaders that I've gotten to know so well, Macron, they're laughing at this whole situation. Nobody can believe it. And this is what we have, and we're stuck with it. Inflation was caused, in my opinion, by energy. Because it's so big. Energy is so big. It's like all-encompassing everything. You make donuts and the ovens and the trucks that deliver them. And no matter what you do, it's so much about energy. And when they stopped drilling, when they, you know, we had it going like nobody, you were a big part of it. You really had a big thing going for selling all this to Europe and all these other countries, right? And we would have made a fortune. And it was so sad to see what they did. They cut it off. And again, we were drilling much more. We were a bigger force than Russia and Saudi Arabia individually. In a year and a half, we would have been a bigger force than them combined. And we would have made so much money. We would have been paying off debt. We would have been doing things that nobody's ever seen this country do.
Let's try an experiment. We've actually got some charts and graphs to show the points that you've been making. So to your point, the CPI overall, the level is up 17%.
Yeah.
Now, 30 months into it, Biden's inflation rate, 7.4% at an annual rate. Yours, less than 2%,
Yeah.
1.9%.
It was actually a perfect number, too. You know,
Unbelievable.
You're a student of inflation, right? You know how inflation... But literally, 2% is the perfect number. They actually don't want it to be zero.
Yeah.
They want it to be 2%, and we hit 2%, if you think, 1.9%.
And by the way, I love your commentary, but look at this. Grocery prices, food at home. The level is up 20%. Under your administration, 2%, again. And then finally, on gasoline, Biden's back to $3.87. That's this week.
Going up.
Yours was around $2 a gallon,
Right.
actually.
That's right.
This is the stuff that's driving people crazy. Let's go to the second one.
Okay.
He says he's created 13 million new jobs. Nobody can find it.
Yeah.
Okay. 2.1 million. You had 4.9 million.
That's right.
He says he's created 800,000 manufacturing jobs. No one can find them. I mean, it's maybe recovery from COVID, but that's all. You had more than twice as many. And then the other thing, in terms of people hurting and living paycheck to paycheck, the mortgage rate has jumped from 2.65% to 7.5%, 7.51. That is killing people. And I don't know that anyone's interviewed a president before and done all these numbers, but, you know, I know you like to do the numbers, and this is the story. There was a Trump boom, and there's a Bidenomics bust. I want to play a sound. Here's Biden attacking you.
When I took office, the pandemic was raging and our economy was reeling.
Am I taking blame for inflation? No.
Why not?
Because it was already there when I got here, man. Remember what the economy was like when I got here? Jobs were hemorrhaging. Inflation was rising. We weren't manufacturing a damn thing here.
What do you make of that? Untruths? I mean, I could call it another word, but after all.
It's a disgrace. We had the greatest economy in history. We then got hit by the pandemic, and then all those jobs were coming back, and we had them back. All of those jobs that we created at a level that nobody's ever seen before, they were all coming back. They were pouring back. And for him to make the statement, I mean, here's one number. The mortgage rate's almost at 8%. And you know, they don't say there's one other thing. You can't get a mortgage. I mean, aside from the 8, you can't. People aren't able to get a mortgage. And we had it down to 2.65, even lower than that. Our gasoline price, you know, the gasoline price is at around $2. We actually had it down much lower than that for a big portion of time. No, we were doing a fantastic job,
That's
and I just see
people.
these numbers.
Don't you think that's killing people? It's killing ordinary people who have to drive to work. It's killing truck drivers.
It's so bad.
It's killing. It's killing housewives. It's killing suburbs.
Right.
All right. So there's a way out of this to get these prices back down.
New president. You got to get rid of this guy. Look, we have so many things that we're going to do, but one of the big ways, you got to get the price of energy down. And we have more energy under our feet. You know, I call it liquid gold. That's what we have. And we were going to be energy dominant. We were energy independent. We were, for the first time, I would say ever, but we were energy independent. We're going to be very shortly, within a year, we're going to be energy dominant. We were going to supply, and you worked on that very hard. You remember you were showing me the ships and the difference between pipelines and ships and all that.
LNG, yes, sir.
But we were going to be sending energy to Europe at a level that we never saw before. We were going to make a fortune with it, like Saudi Arabia. You know, we were number 3 and number 4. And by the time I left, we were number 1 by a lot in terms of energy, oil and gas. We were sending it over to Europe. We were going to send it over to Europe in record numbers. We were going to pay off debt, massive amounts of debt. You know, we were making a fortune with this, and we were going to be paying off debt, and we were going to lower taxes even further. And it would have been a beautiful picture, but now they've stopped all of that. I mean, they ended ANWR. Ronald Reagan, a friend of yours, as you know, he wanted and authors, especially authors, right? But he wanted to get ANWR. And I got ANWR. ANWR could be the size of Saudi Arabia in Alaska, could be the size of Saudi Arabia. We would have had an energy boom like nobody has ever seen before, and we were going to use that to pay off the $35 trillion in debt. You would have been able to take big chunks out of that, and also at the same time lower taxes for middle-income people. And it would have been a beautiful thing, but they ended it. Look, they ended that, then they left the borders open. We built almost 500 miles of border wall. We were going to put up another 200. It was all made. It was sitting there ready to be installed. Would have taken 3 weeks. We were all set, and they didn't want it. I mean, the whole thing is incredible.
He spends his time attacking fossil fuels, A, and B, business in general. I don't think I've ever heard a president in either party attack business so much or attack oil and gas companies and coal companies that employ tens of millions of Americans. I don't understand that, sir.
Larry, you watch him, he can't put 2 sentences together. He doesn't know where he is. He can't walk up a flight of stairs, let alone down a flight of stairs. And you look at this guy, we have the most corrupt president in the history of our country, and we have the most incompetent, simultaneously the most incompetent president. And what he's doing to this country, millions and millions of people are pouring into our country. Look at New York City, look at Chicago, look at these cities, what's happening to them, with hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens coming into and sleeping on Madison Avenue and sleeping in Central Park. And nobody's ever seen anything like this. And by the way, they're coming out of prisons, they're coming out of mental institutions, and they're terrorists, a lot of them. And this is going to be a problem for this country for a long time. And we have to close up that border. We have to seal it up, except for people that want to come in legally. Like we had the safest border in the history of our country. Now we have, I think the worst border in the history of the world. I mean, there's no country that would have allowed this to happen. And it's almost as though they want it to happen. It's almost as though, because the concept of open borders, especially when you don't even check the people just walk into the country. So we don't even know where they come. They come from countries that nobody ever even heard of. And last month they had 142 countries that people came in from these countries. Many of them nobody ever heard of. What's going on with Joe Biden it's insane. But when you watch him, he can't speak, he can't walk, he can't do anything. And he's telling us about energy, and he's telling us about Russia and nuclear weapons. This guy is going to get us into a nuclear war. Our country's going to hell. And we're not going to be the big bar. We have power, but it's waning. In fact, it's waning in terms of our currency. And I'm not just talking about the value of our currency. I'm talking about our currency being used throughout the world.
You want it to remain. You want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency.
Well, I think it's bigger than losing any war. I think if it doesn't, look, we are already reverting to third world status in many ways. You look at our airports, you look at our terminals, you look at our filthy roads and broken roads and everything else. We're like a third world country. We have something that's very powerful, and that's our dollar all over. But you take a look at what's happening to it now with other countries not using it. And you know China wants to replace it with the yuan. And it was unthinkable with us. Unthinkable. Would never have happened. Now people are thinking about it. That could happen.
Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. As you know, I just sat down with former President Donald Trump in an hour-long economic interview. We sat directly across from each other. We were face-to-face. We were talking policies, issues, heavy-duty content, substance. Now, here's my gut reaction. I saw a great American leader. I saw experience, broad-based knowledge, strong recall of facts and figures. I also saw command of our problems and a strong desire to solve them. I saw strength. I saw moderate temperament. And finally, I heard a positive vision to end the country's current decline and rejuvenate America's prosperity and confidence at home and its standing around the world. I also heard common sense. Please take a listen.
You know, to a large extent, everything you and I talk about is common sense, right? And we have a lot of common sense.
I love that.
And the problem is they don't have common sense. They don't know what they're doing, and they're destroying our country. We'll turn it around fast.
There you heard it. On the economy, Mr. Trump wants to reopen the fossil fuel spigots, cut taxes and regulations, protect the value of the dollar, and tear into the Washington, D.C. deep state. He is a superb negotiator, and he will live and die to protect American interests. That is what I heard in our interview. Frankly, I don't see anyone else on the horizon who can match his brand of American leadership.
They come from different walks of life, but all have one thing in common. They want their country back. Parents who want to take back control of their children's education. Veterans tired of being kicked to the curb. They believe in protecting the sanctity of life, securing our borders, standing for the flag, kneeling for God above, and an honest day's pay for an honest day's work. Hillary made fun of them.
You could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Biden called them a threat.
The MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
And DeSantis degradingly called them listless vessels. No, they aren't, Ron. They're great Americans who know there's one person who will always have their backs.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Here now, Fox News contributor and former White House speechwriter Mark Thiessen, along with Fox News contributor and London Center for Policy Research senior fellow DeRoy Murdoch. Mark, to you first. What's the one thing that could set a candidate apart? I will say do not ever mention the word bipartisan. I don't want to hear it.
I don't know about that, but look, I think it's actually bad for Donald Trump that he's not going to be there, but it's good for the Republican Party, because what we're going to see on that stage is an embarrassment of riches. I mean, I would take our bench and put it up against Biden or anyone on the Democrats' bench, and we crush them. They've got so much talent. Tim Scott is so smart. Mike Pence, DeSantis. You go down the list. There's so many great people to choose from, and so it was going to be a good thing for the Republican voters to see that without the shadow of Donald Trump hanging over it, and see what talent, what ability we have, and what kind of candidates we could put forward if Trump is not the nominee. And one of those people has to have a great night and emerge to be the challenger to Donald Trump. There's basically two primaries going on. There's a primary to challenge Donald Trump, and then there's the primary with Trump to decide who's the Republican nominee. And we're going to see the first salvo in that first primary on Wednesday night.
So, but Droy, to Mark's point, in this debate, if you're on the stage, do you think you can take any voters away from Donald Trump? Can candidates do that on the stage on Wednesday night, or is this really a competition for who can get in second place or who can be the heir apparent for the vice presidency who Donald Trump would pick?
Yeah, I agree with a lot that Mark said, but I think that one thing that really is a big advantage to Donald J. Trump staying out of this debate, I'd rather have him in there making his case, but by stepping away from it, what he does is basically create a situation where I think everyone is going to open fire on Ron DeSantis and let all those people try to tear him down because he's the number 2 guy. They'd all like to be the number 2 guy, or at least move up, or gal, as the case may be, and move up the ladder. And so I think you're going to have the other candidates basically trying to tear down Ron DeSantis, and that will put Trump in an even stronger position if Ron DeSantis is even weaker than he is now. So I think there's a real strategic advantage to Trump staying out of it from that standpoint, and really that standpoint alone. But I do agree on the wealth of riches, the tremendous talent we have, very bright, engaged, experienced people who are such a contrast to what we see coming out of the Biden White House these days.
Right, president who's almost non-compos mentis, who's corrupt as hell.
Exactly.
It seems like CNN's starting to think they're losing the war of words, whining on Sunday that Republicans are using verbal jujitsu to turn the left's own words against them. Well, their article goes on to say this, quote, Republicans are masters of verbal jiu-jitsu. It's a form of linguistic combat in which the practitioner takes a political phrase or concept popularized by their opponent and gradually turns it into an unusable slur. Like the Japanese martial art known as jiu-jitsu, its devotees avoid taking opposing arguments head-on and instead redirect their opponent's momentum to beat them. DeRoy, I'm going to come to you. And they go into critical race theory, diversity, issues like that. One woman says you can't even use DEI anymore because it's been weaponized. It's not the words, it's the actual concepts and the ideology that these words represent. They haven't turned them on the left. They've exposed what the left is doing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, you look at something like critical race theory. If they said, look, everyone should be open-minded, be lovely to your neighbors, we'd agree with that. When critical race theory is about how can we get blacks and whites to fight each other and tear the country to pieces, people on the right are going to be opposed to that. But the left is very, very good at this wordplay sort of thing. For example, we used to call them food stamps. Then they decided, well, that's not a good name. Let's call them SNAP. And then we used to call it breastfeeding. Now it's chest feeding. I would think if we called it child sexual mutilation, people would run like hell. You call it gender-affirming care, and it sounds like a spa treatment. So the left is very, very good at using words and coming up with new phrases, usually to act as sort of like a smokescreen to hide what it is that they're trying to do.
Yeah, Mark, isn't that the point, that Republicans just are attacking the concepts, to Dagan's point, the concepts behind the words, and the words crumble because the concepts are garbage, like being woke is garbage concept. Yes?
Yeah, basically the left is fighting jiu-jitsu with itself. Because what they're doing is they're saying stupid stuff, and then Republicans call them on it, and they say, "Whoops, I'm on the ground. I'm on the mat." You know? So, you do yourself on the mat. We didn't even have to try. And this is the party, by the way, keep in mind, whose president called the Taliban takeover of Kabul, 13 dead Americans, and Afghans falling from the fuselages of aircraft leaving Kabul a extraordinary success. If you want to talk about verbal jujitsu, nobody beats Joe Biden.
We call that lying too, or the other. Or
That's another way of putting it.
We could do a whole hour of how they've tried to, in their fascist-like way, change the language and change the meaning of words.
Sign me up.
Purely for control. That's our next special.
I'll do that special with you, Dagan.
Okay.
All right.
Glad to be there for that.
Mark Thiessen, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Take care.